This is what the Bible actually says if you want your faith to give you an unfair advantage in your business, because we are here to win. And what I've noticed is that we are always told, especially in business, just have faith. It's going to work out. Don't worry. Just have faith. But we're never told how to produce that faith or what that faith might look like. So my faith was actually holding me back because I just didn't understand it. I didn't know how to use it, what it looked like, or how to produce it. I didn't understand anything about it. But it was these 3 principles that simplified it, it made it make sense, and it multiplied everything in my business, among other things. But principle number 1, your faith is only a theory until it's tested. And I heard this a long time ago, and it just clicked. That's when it clicked. Your faith is only a theory until it's tested. That means, yes, you're going to have to wait. You're going to need a lot of patience. And I know as I'm saying this, you're tempted to click off of the video right now because it's not what we want to hear. I'm not necessarily selling the dream right now, but I am giving you the truth. Business, life, but business, you're going to need a lot of extreme consistency. You're going to need to work, and you're not always going to know what it's going to produce. But let me give you some hope. Faith is confidence in what we cannot see, but that doesn't mean you're going in blind. If you're going in blind, that's not faith, that's delusion. And honestly, delusion is better than nothing. Sometimes that's what's going to get you to just take the first step. But faith is not blind. Faith is produced through evidence. We have faith because we have evidence. I don't need proof. I need evidence. Evidence is that gravity exists. I can't see it, but the evidence is there, right? I can look around and I can see that things are tied down to the earth. Why? Because of, science. Science is the evidence, right? I don't believe in God because somebody told me to. I believe in God, and that was it. I believe in God because the evidence says Jesus was crucified, and then he was seen walking around 3 days later. You don't go in blind, you follow evidence. So let me ask you a question. If God, every time you sent up a prayer and you said, God, I need money, and every time you sent that prayer up, $1 million landed in your lap, how much faith does that actually require? Well, the answer is none. There's no right answer to that question. The answer is none. You don't need faith. At that point, if you send up a prayer, I need money, God sends you money, he's not your God, he's your genie. A genie doesn't require faith. A genie is not real. The genie serves you. You are not God. But a lot of the times we're walking around as if we are God and God owes us something. I have faith, so you must give me something. Faith is produced through evidence. If it's just given to you, it's not faith. But why then? The next question is, why is faith so important? Because he can do those things. If God can give me money, why doesn't he? There's a million reasons why, but I think it all boils down to this. Faith is what gives you options. God created free individuals, but if God gave you no choice but to believe in him, you're no longer free. It takes away all of your choices, all of your options, and that's what makes you free. So what does this mean for business? What it means for business, and before I go off another tangent, what it means for business is it means you need to stop quitting every single time you don't get what you want or it doesn't look exactly like how you want it to look like, because it's not always going to happen. It's rarely going to happen. Actually, now that I think about it, it's rarely going to happen. You need to give yourself a reason, though, to have faith. You need to give yourself a reason to have faith in your business, to have faith in yourself, have faith in God. How do you do that? You stack the evidence. You do the work. For me, that looks like if I make 100 phone calls and I end up helping only 5 families, that is still 5 families helped. The evidence says if I make more phone calls, my business will move forward. If I make 200 phone calls, it's reasonable to believe I can now have faith because I have evidence that if I make 200 phone calls, I will double my income because now I've helped 10 families. You will have faith the more you move. Faith requires movement. You're not just going to sit around. Think about it like this. How much faith would you have if you just stayed in your room and thought you'd become a millionaire? That's what I mean by it's not faith just because you don't see it. That's delusion. It's not going to happen. You have faith because you're going out and doing the work that is required to produce that result. It doesn't mean it's always going to happen like that, but that's where faith comes in. It moves you forward. It gives you a reason to keep going. That is faith. You don't always know what the end scene is going to look like, but that doesn't mean you stop. that actually gives you every reason to keep going. Figure it out. Find out what it's going to be. Do the work. That is why your faith will move you forward. And just because, again, you don't know what the end scene is going to look like doesn't mean you're not going to collect wins along the way. The first phone call I make might be the first family I help. But if I keep going, even if it's not the first, it might be the 10th. It's still a family helped. That is still a win. It is evidence. I'm stacking the evidence, and I'm collecting wins as I go. It's not always going to be all dull and boring, like, oh, I just got to work. You are going to collect wins along the way. That's how you continue to build your faith. Collect evidence, stack the evidence, build wins along the way. Do the work. The second principle is your faith cannot be the reason, and actually this is probably my favorite one. Your faith cannot be the reason you must win, as well as the excuse for why you cannot win. And I deal with the reason why this one is my favorite is because it cannot be your reason and your excuse. This is my favorite because I see it on a day-to-day basis. Onboarding new partners, new business partners, because we recruit a lot of people. We always want to understand who we're working with, and we always want to understand what their goals are, what are their dreams, what are they actually doing this for? Because if I ask you right now, what if I were to bring you on and you say, well, I want to make money? That's not the answer. I mean, it's an answer, but it's not the answer. Okay, what is that money going to get you? Well, I want to spend more time with my family. Okay, but how are you going to do that? Well, it's going to give me, being able to control my income is going to give me freedom of time. I can now go produce my income without having somebody else just have their thumb on my back telling me what to do all day. So now I can spend quality time with my kids. Okay, there's the answer. Right? You are doing this because you want quality time with your kids. But let me show you what happens. I see this all the time. These people come into my business or their business. We help them start their own business, but I'm the one training them, or somebody on our team is. And they say, I want quality time with my kids. That's why I need to win. I need to be able to control my income so I can spend more quality time with my family. But the second things get tough, and it's not exactly, they're the ones who are like, well, is this a get rich quick? And then they don't get rich quick, and then they quit. We tell them it's not a get rich quick, but they didn't get rich quick, so now they quit. But the second things get tough, these people are the ones who say they needed to win because they wanted quality time with their family, but they can't win because they are spending time with their family. And I'm not saying don't spend time with your family, but you just turned your reason into an excuse. You never hung out with your kids. You never spent 2 hours after work just sitting down with your kids because you had work to do. But now all of a sudden the business makes it too tough to do nothing with your kids. So now it doesn't make sense. You just turn your kids into an excuse why you can't win. Isn't that the reason why we started? You needed time with your kids, which is why you started something new to change something, which makes sense. But now it's not how you wanted it to look, or it's not what you thought it would look like. And so now you can't do it because you want time with your kids. It doesn't add up. One of my favorite quotes, especially now, I keep hearing it over and over again. It's in the book Think and Grow Rich. It says, there is no such thing as something for nothing. If you want a result, but you're not willing to put anything in to get it, there is no such thing as something for nothing. There is always a price. There's always a price to pay, and you cannot use your reasons that you must win as your excuse. Well, not if you want to win. You can do that, but not if you want to win. And so it's understanding that. Here's where I'm going with this. Most people that I sit with, because of my content, it's about faith and finance and business. I sit down with a lot of Christians. Here's why this upsets me so much. I sit down with a lot of Christians who, after going through this whole process, man, I've been praying for a solution like this. Man, I've been praying for an opportunity or this education. Everybody keeps telling me to put my money somewhere, but they never explain how or why, what it would look like, anything, just how nobody explains how to have faith. And so I've been praying for this. And so it gets real. Okay, this is how we do it. Let's put it into place. Let's start doing it now. And then their response, their objection is, wait, hold on, let me pray about it. Okay, so the reason just became the excuse again. Here's what happens. It's just a constant feedback loop. I prayed for a solution. I got a solution. It's in front of my face. Now I got to make the decision to put the solution into place. But I want to pray about it. But because you're not actually moving anywhere, you don't know what God's voice sounds like. So even if you pray about it, he's giving you a solution, but you don't know what that looks like. And so you're provided with a solution, but you want to pray. So it's this constant feedback loop of nothing. You don't do anything because you're using your reasons as your excuse, which inherently just does not work. It doesn't work. You cannot use your faith as your excuse. And I'll never be somebody who says, no, don't pray on it. I'll never pressure somebody into a decision. That's just not how we do business. But I'll do something much worse. I'll call you out on it. Once upon a time, there was this guy who was swimming in a lake, and his goal was to go from this one side of the lake to the other, but he got caught up in the middle. He just got too tired. He couldn't do it. And so he's in this middle of this giant lake, can't even see the shoreline, and he knows he's not going to last much longer. He's just floating there. And so he sends up a prayer, God, I need help. Save me. And seconds later, a boat comes by, and the guy says, hey, you look like you need help. Let me get you on board. Come up here. And the guy says, no, God's going to save me, right? But then, so the guy leaves, like, well, I can't force you to want help. Okay. So he sends up another prayer, God, I need help. Save me. And then another boat comes by, and it's the same thing. No, God's going to save me. So the boat leaves, and then two more boats come by, and then he ends up drowning. He didn't make it, and he's at the pearly white gates, and he says, God, why didn't you save me? And God looks at him like, you dummy, I sent you 4 boats. This is what's happening when you're using your faith as your reason to win, and then it becomes your excuse to lose. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's just inherently wrong. You cannot use your reason as your excuse, and there is no such thing as something for nothing. But this is what Scripture says. That quote is from Think and Grow Rich, but Scripture says your faith without works is dead. If you're not willing to take a step, you don't have faith, because if you had faith, you would actually be taking a step. It's a universal law. There is no such thing as something for nothing. Take your faith. This is what it means in business. Take your faith and put it into practice. That is a true living faith. Let it be the reason you move forward instead of sit and do nothing. Nothing changes if you don't change anything. If you don't take a step, nothing will ever change. And there's this scripture. It's in Ecclesiastes 11:4. It says, farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. The farmer doesn't know if it's raining today. He doesn't know that it's not going to rain tomorrow. I mean, I guess unless you check the weather app. But even after that, he doesn't know it's not going to rain the next week, right? At some point, there will always be rain. But that doesn't mean he doesn't plant. That doesn't mean he doesn't still go to work. That doesn't mean the plants stop growing. It just means he needs to do the work regardless of what's happening. It's never going to be a perfect condition. He just needs the faith that these plants are going to grow. If he does the work, the plants will grow because, he has evidence that it will. But he doesn't have evidence if he never does any of the work in the first place. You build your faith as you work. Collect the evidence as you go. As you wait and do nothing, your faith it doesn't plateau. People think that just because they're not doing anything, they're not growing. It's just they're at the same level, but that's not how it works. As soon as you stop growing, you start dying. A plane in the air doesn't keep flying if all the engines cut off. You don't just if they cut the engines but then turn them back on, they're going to need to rebuild momentum. Of course, it depends on how long they do that. You get the example, right? Faith requires movement. This is the same message of the first principle. It's the same message in the second. And hint, it's going to be the same message for the third one. Of course, a little bit different, so still watch it. But here's what happens. It's that feedback loop. Even if you have the right opportunity right in front of your face, you don't know what it looks like. Because you're not moving. You don't have any evidence. You don't have any experience because you're not moving. You say you have faith, but you're not moving. So then you go back and you pray, God, I need an opportunity. And then it's in your face. The next boat comes. No, God, I need an opportunity. God is going to give me an opportunity. The next one comes. No, God's going to save me, right? That's what's happening. It's an excuse. That's all it is. It's an excuse. Let your faith be the reason you win. You must win, instead of being the excuse why you can't win. It always happens. Okay. Now the third one is you are not entitled to God's blessings nor his explanations. And for this one, I'm primarily just going to read you two passages, and I'll explain them as we go, but I'm going to read you two passages. The first one to explain the blessings, and the second one to explain the explanations. Ironic. But I'm going to read you two things. The first one comes from chapter 3 in Daniel. It says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. Faith. He's able to save us. He will rescue us from your power. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up. Okay. This one is big and all of these are big for me. That's why I'm talking about it, because these are things that I've been learning. So when I say you, I'm also talking to me. But we're not entitled to anybody else's blessings. We're not entitled to God's work. We are, if we do the work, we're still not entitled to anything. God doesn't owe us anything. Faith, true faith, and I think this is one of my favorite displays of faith. We don't need to rank displays of faith, but I think it's the most powerful display of faith because it describes exactly how it's supposed to be, even if you don't. But most of us are walking around thinking, because I have faith, God, you must bless me. Because I donated to the church, God, you must bless me. You got to do it now. You think you're entitled to anything. You're not entitled to anything. You're not entitled to blessings, especially if you're not working. You do it once and you think God's just going to, right? It's not how it works. Faith says, even if you don't, I will. Faith says, whether or not it happens, I will work as if it has. That is true faith. If you really have faith, that's what you're saying. God doesn't owe you anything. Nobody else owes you anything. And even if they do, you shouldn't be depending on somebody else's debt to save you. You are not entitled to somebody else to come and save you. So that just means do the work. But the second passage comes from Job. And if you don't know who Job is, Job went through all these trials because essentially the devil came to God and was like, look, they only believe in you because you're blessing them. You give them such an easy life. Of course they're going to believe in you. Of course they're going to believe there's a God. But if I took all these things away, nobody would believe in you. And so God says, okay, test Job, right? So Job was that guy. And Job lasts the test. He beats the test, which really he just kept his faith, even though he lost everything. God said, take everything except for his life. God let the devil do whatever he wanted with him. Just don't take his life. And he took his wife, he took his family, he took his animals, he took his wealth, he took everything. He gave him these boils on his skin. He did whatever he could to get him to curse God, and he never did. This is after that. Okay, so this passage is after all of that, and after God restored all of his wealth, and after all, he doubled his wealth, actually. Everything he lost, God doubled. But this passage in Job 38 says, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me, if you know so much, who determined its dimensions and stretched out the surveying line? What supports its foundations? And who laid its cornerstone as the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy? This is God's response to Job demanding answers. He restored his wealth, but Job was like, what the heck, man? What was that? God never told him what was happening. It just happened. It was a test of his faith, not even God testing his faith. It was the devil testing his faith. God didn't explain it to him. And so Job was like, what the heck? What was that? Everything was good, and then all of a sudden my life is nothing. It's terrible. What was that? He was demanding from God, tell me. And God is saying, who do you think you are? Basically, who do you think you are to demand questions from me? Demand an explanation. You weren't here when I built the foundations of the earth. And actually, this entire chapter, if you go read it, he keeps going on and on. Where were you when this? Where were you when this? Where were you when this? You are not entitled to God's blessings. You are not entitled to his explanations. You don't always know what it's going to look like. This is faith, and it doesn't sound great. I get it. I mean, again, I'm not here to sell the dream right now. It's not always picture perfect, but it's faith. It's doing the work that needs to be done, even if you don't necessarily know what's going to happen after, or you don't even know why it happened. You just know that it worked. That is faith. It worked for Job. That is faith. He held his faith, and God replenished everything and actually doubled everything. This is faith. You're not entitled to blessings. You're not entitled to faith. Faith is saying, even if you don't, I will. That is faith. And I can't imagine, I mean, you can apply that to almost anything in your business. You will never be in a position of desperation if everybody knows, if your clients know, even if you don't do this, I'm going to keep going. Do you want it or not? I mean, maybe not say it like that, but you get what I'm saying. Keep on moving. Faith without works is dead. Faith requires movement. Movement produces evidence. Evidence produces confidence, and confidence produces faith. It is all tied together. And yes, this applies to all three principles, and all three principles were different, but essentially all three of them do the work that needs to be done, and your faith will give you a business, an unfair advantage in your business. And that's what we want. We're here to win. So always be moving forward. And okay, so hope you enjoyed. Subscribe, like, comment, blah, blah, blah. All right, see you next video.